We Are Lonely was recorded on a number of Aboriginal lands, including Gumbaynggirr country and across the Kulin Nations. We would like to pay our respects to the custodians and elders of these nations. We would also like to pay our respects to the custodians of the land on which you are now listening.
So it is currently 5:42 in the morning. I've just been out clubbing tonight. Going out clubbing alone was... Yeah, I've just had this knot in my stomach and it's so hard. Like, I do really feel so lonely and isolated.
Isolating myself has been a habit, and being lonely, I guess, is also it's become a habit for me.
I think loneliness is something I've definitely struggled with.
Everyone feels lonely at some stage in their life.
When we don't talk about it, when it's left unsaid, that's when it can start to spiral and build up and turn into something much greater.
And that has adverse effects on your mental and physical health.
Connection is everything. As humans and as mammals, like, we require that connection.
That anxiety, that trigger of loneliness that we get when we don't have that is actually really important, because it's that reminder of, okay, there's something missing here, we need to reconnect.
So loneliness to me is a question rather than a situation that you can't get out of.
This is We Are Lonely, and I'm Gemma Spegg.
You know, still end up like prioritising work over spending time with people I love or something like this.
We've connected 4 people in their 20s with mentors who are helping them build strategies to connect.
Personally, when I was younger, I had the sense of like family and like, you know, people come together and all that type of stuff. It doesn't happen these days anymore.
This show is supported by Medibank. Before we get into things, I want to let you know that being about loneliness, this podcast gets personal and vulnerable. At times, we'll be exploring difficult themes, including social anxiety, racism, and isolation. If this raises any issues for you, you can call Lifeline on 13 11 14 or go to reachout.com, which offers dedicated support for young people. In the last episode, our 4 participants and their mentors looked at ways to build a sense of self, and now Charity and Dee are working out how to take that same self into the world.
You said to me, and you've got up here as your number one value.
Probably authenticity and respect.
It's no point being around people that don't expect or accept you.
Yeah.
All right, we've just got to find out what that looks like.
I'm interested to find
you
that.
say it's a really important value, and sometimes the real strong personality that you've got is just there, but it's hiding this.
Yeah.
So we've got to work out what it is, and we will.
Yeah. I'm keen. Yeah. I'm eager.
I know. I got no doubt we will.
What's your role? Where do you fit in?
Professor Ian Hickey is the co-director of the University of Sydney's Brain and Mind Centre.
Okay, so you're different in certain ways. You're not as capable in certain other ways, but forget that. Which bits are you most capable? If by spending more time developing that skill, if by spending more time understanding that capability, finding the right environment where that fits in which your quiet nature or your not so quiet nature or your long attention span or your short attention span is actually beneficial to that particular environment, where it's a good mix with others to produce a collective outcome.
Our 20s are a big time for this kind of investigation and questioning because our lives are changing a fair bit. Only a few years ago, we were at school and we each had our own school identity. Sporty, academic, musical, popular, or whatever it was. And then we left school and the world felt a bit bigger and the options for how we presented to the world expanded. Naturally, alongside those changes, a lot of our friendships might be adapting as well. This shift has been more apparent for Holly because she was ill during the time she was transitioning from school to her 20s.
You know, when you're sick, it's that thing of people always say, oh, you know, I miss the old you, or, you know, the old you never used to, you know, you're so different, or I just miss, you know, there's that grief for people that watch you go through sickness, and they're grieving the loss of that other version of you, and they have to learn to love the new version that you are. But yeah, it's a painful process. It's hard to then force that upon potential, like, you know, old friends. That's why it almost feels easier to start again than reach out to old friends.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a few different things here that I'm hearing. I mean,
sorry, I feel like we've just gone on a completely different.
No, that's fine.
Yeah,
we have, and that's okay, because we were going to come to this anyway. You are focused on the fact that you feel like your identity has shifted a lot. And at the same time, you know, they aren't the same people that they were, you know, years ago either. You know, The reality is that change is an inevitable part of the human experience. That is like one of the things we know for certain out of everything in our world, that change is inevitable. You know, it will happen. We will change. We will get older. Life will throw things at us, and it will shift who we are. That is a guarantee.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's, you know, your abilities with people to shift with each other, to grow with each other, that makes those relationships kind of continue to work and continue to last. And that it's actually okay if you don't. It doesn't mean that they're not nice people or good friends or of value. It just means that, you know, you are a different person to who you were then, and so you care maybe about slightly different things now, and that's okay. That's also a part of growing up, and that's a part of getting older, and that's a part of getting to know yourself more. And that there's an okayness with the fluidity of relationships in that way as you're growing.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. And I mean, I think, you know, I'm hyper aware of how much I've changed, and, you know, you think you've changed so much more than everyone else, but like you said, in the reality of it, everyone changes, but I'm just aware of mine because it's me.
We're going to hear Tessa taking Holly through some ways to manage these changes later on.
Going out clubbing alone was... Yeah, I've just had this knot in my stomach, and it's so hard. Like, I do really feel so lonely and isolated.
Tim recorded this after leaving a club in Melbourne.
Now, all night, just going through my head has just been, I don't belong here. At a gay club, and yeah, I'm proud of myself that I came out to the club, did something different, did something new, but yeah, I mean, the best part of the night is this one. Literally sitting here has been so relaxing and reflective, and if anything, I'm glad it got me out of the house to be able to breathe some fresh air, see some new stuff, and just reflect.
Tim and Sean are catching up to talk through what that moment meant for him.
It's been a bit of a funny experience. Like, thinking back to when I first started clubbing and now feels like night and day. I felt so outgoing and I'm just want to be myself and do whatever compared to now where a lot of the time, yeah, I've made it to the club, I've gone out and I've connected with a few friends, but you know, after a little while, I've sort of just retreated and gone into a safe place. And doesn't mean that I don't want to be social. I want to be able to talk to people. I want to be funny, charming, charismatic like yourself.
Don't we all?
But yeah, I guess the past few weeks have just really solidified for me. Like, look, I don't mind going out. I love going out. But my element is being around people I know or being in a space where I can get to know people.
Yeah.
It's sort of that intimacy. Yeah.
You're transitioning out of your club kid phase and into your big kid gay phase.
Yeah.
It sounds like this is a perfect insight for you, which is like you'll continue to do that. You'll go out, whatever. But if you're feeling the most at peace in yourself and most connected to others in more intimate environments, then like that's what we need to be. That's great.
Yeah.
Chase that.
Yeah, after a few drinks, it's easy to be that like, yes, queen, go, you know, like you look great. But like, yeah, when I'm in my sober mind and not on alcohol, it's difficult to, I guess, be that face value for me. You know, I want to see and understand more of a person. Like, I can compliment someone, I can tell them, no, Sean, I love your shirt.
Thank you so much.
But it just doesn't feel right to me. But it's good that we get to have this conversation.
Yeah, no, I'm loving this. I think at the end of the day, the goal is not to like follow someone else's system or take on someone else's advice or do it because you're supposed to, right? The goal is to get to a place where you feel really happy and secure in Melbourne and you feel like it's yours and you feel like any day of the week you can go out and chase a feeling, and that feeling is happiness, contentment. It doesn't actually matter what it is, as long as it's not alone, frustrated, or anxious. And so you've just done a great thing, which is I've tried one way, which is getting out there and pushing myself and being with my friends and going out. And here's when it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
And then you isolate that and then you avoid it. That's what I do. I 100% hate all the things that you're talking about. Pushing yourself out there and going to those events, sometimes you never know, diamonds in the rough occur. But it sounds like you're saying you're much better in a more intimate environment, which is perfect. So we're doing dinner parties. We're not always going clubbing. You know, you're having a friend over to your apartment, or you're going to theirs, or you're going to a park, or maybe you are just like going and sitting on the side of a road on a bench and just chatting. Like that seems like that would get you off in a very different way. And then you get to be the best version of yourself, which is to listen and observe and hear stories and remember them 6 months later. You know, that seems like that would be you at your best. And if that's the case, then that's what we chase. That's great.
Holly and Tessa are picking up their thread about how to approach changing friendships on the back of Holly's work with her childhood self.
While it was really cathartic to hold space for my, inner child and to be able to shine a light on the way I felt then and probably still feel now, but also at the same time, like the question just kept coming up for me, am I that person to other people that I'm so desperately wanting for myself? And I'm not. And, recognizing that was actually bittersweet because it's like, well, you know, I can look outside to doing new things and putting myself in positions where I can meet new people, but am I actually going, like, is it going to change anything if I'm not being that friend to other people that I want for myself? Because I can't want something from other people that I'm not giving out.
It also, I can hear the bittersweetness of that, and yet at the same time, I can hear the power in that, right? Because if it is about that, then you can shape that. Like, you can actually do something about that, because it means, if it means that I'm not showing up the way I want to have or receive friends, then it's less about what other people are doing and more about what you're doing. And that's the bit that we can control, right? This could segue actually into the next part of this, because this idea, you know, what is a good friend? You know, what is a bad friend? And is a friendship one in which we never have to put in work? You know, arguably friendships, like any relationships, for them to have longevity, you know, we have to put attention into and work into. But I suppose that's the thing about loneliness. Like, I think, and particularly in your circumstance, you know, there's very legitimate reasons as to why we can become lonely. And some of them aren't necessarily because of just who we are and things we've failed to do. Sometimes they can be systematic. Sometimes they can be because of illness, external things that, you know, we can't predict or protect ourselves from. What keeps us lonely often is that cycle, though, where, say, we've been isolated or we've become isolated, we then, through that isolation, become less confident in ourselves, less trusting of ourselves and our judgments, more suspicious of others and their intentions. And that's the loop that we can then find ourselves in. And I suppose when I hear your story, I guess that's the piece I hear is, I don't think it's you that got you here as much as I think, you know, what you're noticing now is that I want to get out of this, but I'm recognizing that maybe now is the time where I'm learning that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's still important, though, that I have recognized the part I've played in potentially not, you know, contributing to sustainable friendships. I don't know, there's so many ways to be a good friend.
Well, and a lot of it is values aligned.
Yeah, for sure.
Usually we're going to start to practice the things in our friendships and relationships that are the closest things to our, you know, what we really value most. You know, some people might value loyalty over honesty. You know, if you were to write down your top 10 things that make up a good friend, or you just write your really big list, and then you narrow it down to the 10 that are the most important to you, and you start to sort of unpack, well, what does that actually mean in practice? What does that look like? But then also, you know, maybe how are some ways that I can start to implement this with the people that I do have as friends that I can start to practice this with. Because that's the other thing I think that we haven't sort of spoken much about, is that the importance of, you know, starting these new ways of showing up with people you already have a sense that are going to respond relatively well. So building those muscles or those skill sets, or, you know, communication, I guess, tools or tactics with people that, you know, are going to receive them relatively well.
Yeah.
And we start there and we build them up there, and then we kind of then can start to expand them out.
Once you work out what you value in others and who you want to be with other people, you might realize it's not your reality. Then you need to look for ways to make that change.
In the queer community, we have our chosen family. So that concept, like, really sticks with us.
All of those families that we choose, most of them we have to make ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's annoying and also like the beautiful gift of our community. And so the only thing stopping you is you or us putting together a plan that wills that into existence, potentially. Because, I mean, listen, we don't need to pretend for a second that this is easy. It's not. We've had a really long time in human history, an unusual, catastrophic, strange, that has rewired a lot of our brains and made it a lot easier to not push ourselves. When you were in uni back in Perth, or when I was in uni back in the States, that's just a part of what it means to be young, right? Yeah. Everyone's just going out. You go out on Thursday, Friday nights. You know the local bars. You're meeting people there. You're establishing connections when you're wasted.
Yeah.
Right? It's easier. It just is. And now that you're an adult and people are working and people are going to uni, it's harder. Schedules are harder. And then you throw on top of that a pandemic. And then our brain has said, this is safer. This is easier. I don't need to go out. That seems complicated. That seems like more work. I just don't want you thinking, like, sitting here hearing this and going, actually, it is pretty easy. No, it's not. Yeah. But it is easy when we say to people, I'm not as happy as I could be, and I'd like to be. And the only thing stopping me is maybe, I always say, like, enrolling people in the possibility, like bringing other people in and saying, I'm feeling a little bit lonely. I'm feeling like I don't have as big of a community as I did. I really wish I did. And I'm doing a good job with my gaming connections, and I've met some people. But when I look into the future, I see a happier version of myself. And one of the ways I could get there is by setting a goal. Like, are you enjoying school to the fullest? Is there a way that we might look at that relationship and figure out ways to make uni friends?
Something like that. That would be really good.
Because, I mean, you're spending a lot of time there.
Yeah.
Because I guess the reason I asked the question at all is university systems create a lot of extracurriculars that most students do not leverage.
Yeah, and I know this time around I was like, okay, last time when I went to uni, I didn't join any clubs, I didn't do any extracurricular, and I was like, I'm going to do it this time. And then I sort of tried at the start of the pandemic, you know, they had like the gamers club. So I was like, okay, cool. I can join that. That would be easy. But it's just a bit intimidating when you see like other people talking amongst each other and like, oh, they know about each other. They know like,
of course,
how do I get in there without looking stupid?
I don't think that that's a strange feeling. I think that's a normal one. And especially if it's not like the beginning of the year and everyone's a first year, I can understand that. Do you have a friend that would go with you that's a part of university? It's a big ask for me to be like, I want you to go to one meeting, and I boot you by yourself. Do you know anyone?
No, and that's the thing, like moving interstate and being a bit older, I don't have any like friends that go to my uni. Okay. So yeah, that is one hurdle.
Instead of making a massive leap into saying you're going to go, because at the end of the day, I don't know that I would do that. So why would I ask you to do it? It might be interesting to just identify what the groups are, because I bet there's an LGBTQI plus group. There almost always is at every university. And in my experience, I don't know if this is your experience, that group is usually misfits, right? It's a bunch of people who don't know how to make friends. They're used to being the only person in their smaller town who's like them. And so they go to university and that becomes a safer place. It might be interesting to just identify all the groups that you might want to be a part of. Yeah. And let's not set a goal bigger than that. Let's just identify them. Because a second step could be communicating via like email with them. I did that at university. I emailed the Pride group and just said in writing that I was nervous. And that was such a great way for me to go to the first meeting, because the girl messaged me and said, I felt the same way. How about I meet you beforehand or coffee? And I'm not saying that will happen, but maybe instead of saying, I'm going to go to the meeting, which could be daunting.
Yeah.
Especially if you're going to go alone. It's like step one, we'll identify. Step two, maybe, depending on your comfort, we just craft the perfect intro email just to say the truth. And the truth is, I don't know anyone. I don't really want to rock up by myself. Do you have any advice? Or when are your meetings? Or how many people are going to be there? And then we can decide what to do.
Yeah.
We've just spent the past little while looking at why we need to know ourselves so that we can build relationships around who we really are. But that doesn't mean that we should only spend time with those people who resonate with us. We want our key inner circle to be our people, but to really combat loneliness, we also need to relate to the world as a whole.
A lot of the things that are seen as being, not very important, they're very transient, as if they're not important. Often they are actually quite consequential. To be known in your own coffee shop, to be known in your own local community, to connect with the same people.
This is Professor Ian Hickey.
So I think one of the issues around loneliness and other factors has been factors over a long period of time that have meant we spend a lot less time together. Transgenerational families, wider social groups, wider kin, that the area we operate in has got smaller and smaller numbers of people operating in it. And the smaller the number of people, the more they tend to share just one view of the world. There's been a much greater emphasis on individual identity, that I only talk to the people who look like me, I only read the media that comes to me, and my media selects all the time. I hate the fact that Netflix has decided I only watch one kind of film. Somehow they've decided that, i.e. the algorithms, etc. behind it, assume that that is me, that I'm a very narrow thing. I'd like to think that I actually share values and I have experiences with children, grandchildren, other people in diverse kind of worlds, that I'm not simply defined that way. But we do have a lot of forces reinforcing the primacy of those things at the moment. The primacy of a sort of individual identity and speaking only to that identity and not being able to speak with anyone else, not being able to share with anyone else, not being able to recognise, or being able to recognise that my perception of the world is different.
The polarisation issue, I think that starts from our leadership right across our country and our world. We follow what we think is the tone of the season, and if our governments are very polarising, then it rubs off. If our governments are trying, to use more conciliatory and collaborative language, it rubs off. If our schools are doing the same thing, it rubs off. I don't think there's one aspect of the structure and of our society that doesn't play a role in that sense of isolation.
Dr. Lisa Mundy is a developmental psychologist with the Australian Institute of Family Studies.
I think it's a really important point around this, the kind of the polarisation of views. And I think that's why we have to be, those skills around kind of the social and emotional development, being able to, to kind of understand different points of view, and the only way you can understand different points of view is if you understand your own point of view to start with, and you understand your own, the way that you think and your emotions, and then you can understand how other people are thinking about things, and being able to have debates and discussions, and not be like, well, I'm never going to speak to you again, or that's not the worldview that I subscribe to. So, and actually being able to kind of have that back and forth. So things like critical thinking and decision making, those skills as well are going to be really, really important.
This plays into loneliness because it speaks to that urge we have to cut people from our lives rather than having difficult conversations, and how limited we can become in who we interact with. It's also about being authentic in our relationships, because if we don't turn up as ourselves and say what we need, we can feel lonely even when we're with people. Here's Holly and Tessa teasing this out a little bit more.
It almost becomes habitual to just go, I'm just going to people please, or I'm going to show up in a way I know that they're going to like. And then you're doing it thinking, this isn't me. But it's what you think you need to do, or the way you think you need to be.
And so that actually then starts to sound more like a boundaries issue.
Yeah.
Than anything else.
Yeah, 100%. So true. I don't have boundaries. Like, boundaries, what are they? Not sure. They're something other people have, not me.
When we hear the word boundary, we immediately think it's this really rigid, ruled, hard, confrontational thing. And it's really not about that. boundaries, whether it's boundaries with self or with others, it's really feeling able to be honest with our needs and wants, and with ourselves and with other people. And actually the most compassionate people are the ones who have boundaries, because it keeps them out of resentment.
Yeah, it's so true. Do you, would you say you have boundaries with your friends?
Yeah, well, I am honest. If I can't come to something, and so I'll say no to things. So that might mean, boundaries might look like saying no to things. But boundaries would also be, me voicing if a friend has upset me, and there's lots of ways you can do that. For example, there's a friend that I have, a really good friend, one of my favorite people in the world, who is terrible at responding to text messages, and they don't live in the same place as I do. So we rely on, other forms of communication to stay in touch. And, for a long time that frustrated me, and I'd really try and, hold they're busy, they've got things on, in my mind, but it would make it really hard to kind of organize things and to do things. And so one day when we were together face to face, I sat down with her and I just sort of said, hey, I just want to get into your mind and understand a little bit more. You receive the text message, then what happens? Tell me what happens. Let me into your headspace, and I'll communicate, and I'll sort of say, what is it that you need from me, but also communicating that, when you don't write back, this is how it can make me feel. And so when we just can understand each other a bit better, and for her, she's got boundaries around, how to communicate. She really struggles with, voice messages or things along that route. And so I'm better off actually just giving her a quick call. But by sharing each other's boundaries around that, and being honest around that, we're able to be better friends to each other because of it. But we've got to have that conversation. And learning how to have those difficult conversations, or even just being able to say no to things, is a practice and a skill. There's a formula for things like this, writing scripts, writing things down, figuring out what it is you want to say first. Also, starting with curiosity. It doesn't even have to start with, I feel this. It could be, for example, with my friend, hey, I'm just wondering what goes on for you when this happens. The way you shape the conversation, yes, we can't control how the other person responds, but we absolutely can shape the tone of that conversation.
Yeah.
Knowing who we are and being ready to take ourselves out into the world is one thing. But how do we actually connect with a community? How do we reach out? Early on in her conversations with Dee, Charity said she didn't feel connected with the local Aboriginal community where she lives on Gumbaynggirr land.
Good morning, Charity.
Good morning, Auntie B.
Auntie B Ballingarry is a respected Gumbaynggirr elder who lives near Charity. They met as part of this project.
I know that it's a struggle, and I know that you can be really lonely, but then it changes. You can be alone in a room. I can be in a room with a lot of people and be so lonely in there because I feel like I'm the only one. And there's a room full of people that's all talking to each other. That's about me. That's about how I contribute to the discussion in the room. If I sit here, I'm going to be lonely as well as alone. I mean, it's not easy to step out into yourself.
Yeah.
Step out. You know, the only thing I can say is, if you can, turn up and be seen. And somewhere along that path, you'll forget that you're out there to make a difference to your life. It'll just become a thing because, you know, like you'll think, Auntie Bees are always saying to me, turn up.
Yeah.
And then you'll forget that. Just turn up.
Just turn up, yeah. It's just, I've always had like this sense of not belonging anywhere. And so like I've never, like, oh, where are you from? And I've always said, good question. I don't know. I did grow up on Biripi country and I grew up on Dungari country. That is where my grandparents are from, it's Dungari and down Eden ways. But yeah, I just never really fit in and always felt like an outsider, and like you had to kind of be a certain somebody to fit in a certain place, and it's just kind of got to be somebody to be recognised as somebody.
My main self says, because I know when I wasn't known, when I was surviving not such a good relationship, I felt like I was the only person in the world. It was a struggle that I had to work through. It starts off here in my head. No matter what, I am surrounded by my ancestors. No matter what. So I'm not alone and I'm not lonely. They'll always be here. I've got all these heritages, like you've got Biripi heritage, Dungari heritage, and whatever else. Like you can identify with one, but you'll always have those other ones. And if you acknowledge that, you're honouring all your stop-off points. And that's how I believe that it becomes a thing where you will get settled. And it won't be a thing to feel like you belong, because you belong anyway. And so, you know, like it will grow. And so with that growth is your growth, I believe. Just wondering here, can I tell you a story? So we're talking about 1974. I didn't have much say about where I lived. It was kind of like taken as a given that as a married woman that I would naturally go to where my partner was following his job, you know, like his career path. So 1974, we started our life in Western Australia at the top end, they call it. So our first place to stay for 3 years was Wyndham, and that's the top of Western Australia. And I felt really lonely for my family. So I started to write me to them. I wrote poetry to do with bringing me to them. I wrote a song about Yuangai, and I still sing that song today. Yuangai is where I spent all of my primary school years, and I think it's about tapping into how I know I can connect with my family when they're not around. And so moving away from tribal country felt like I wasn't doing the right thing, and it troubled me. It really troubled me that I was going away when I was on the threshold of establishing who I am and what I'm about. And so I felt uncomfortable with that. So I felt that some of my community members may not have viewed this as a positive thing. And I think I actually took that on because when I came back to tribal country, it was like I had to start all over again to establish who I am and what I stand for. And that was a lot of hard work. Like at the end of the day, it was worth it because I now know that that I'm high profile, but I had to work hard to get here to where I am now. The thing that stands out for me when I need to rise above things, and it's lessons from my parents, especially the thing that it's not my story. If there's an action or if there's people talking about me, I believe that if I can just think in my head, just rise above it. It's not your story. You just stay present in your own skin and be that strong person that you know you are.
Mm.
So if you was to define to me, like a check-in,
Yeah.
how do you feel right now?
How do I feel right now? Content. Best way to describe me right now is
It's a
content.
beautiful word.
Mm.
Well, I believe that's great. Well, I feel my feeling right now is gratitude.
Mm.
I just think that it's an honour to be able to be in a young person's life.
Vice versa, from the other end.
Thank you.
To make me think I shouldn't care for you, but talk is cheap, especially when we only care for half the truth. And I don't know what you've been through.
It's one thing for us to suggest that you head out into the world to find your place and to open up to different perspectives. But it's important to acknowledge that our society makes these steps easier for some people than others.
I have a really common experience that lots of like mixed race people have who I know, and especially mixed race people who have grown up in predominantly white neighborhoods, which is what happened with me.
This is Alex.
For essentially all of my child and adolescent life, I believed that I was white. You know, I realized when I was 21 that I wasn't white because one of my friends was like, "You're an Arab." And I was like, "Yeah." And they were like, "You're not Anglo." And I was like, "Yeah." And they were like, "You're not white." And yeah, it just hit me. And I was like, I'm actually not, you know? And I've never really thought about the fact that I could be something different. This is just part of Australia's really complex race identity history, and we don't talk about it. And yeah, you know, I think it makes people like me, mixed race people, people of color, people who are different, people who aren't white, I think it ultimately makes them feel like, they're not the norm, because we're not the norm, you know, we're a minority in this country. But I'm none of this is to say that I don't like my life here. I really do. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. But I think that part of living here means accepting that, that I'm not going to feel represented while looking around. You know, we're in a park at the moment, and you know, a lot of white people, and yeah, it's, you know, it's sad. It makes you feel lonely, and it makes you feel like this kind of great multicultural project and these decolonial things that people speak about, that while they're happening, you know, I guess it's going to happen. These changes will take place over a really long time, if at all.
One thing that I definitely connect with Alex on is being multiracial.
This is Alex's mentor, Barry.
My father's African English and my mother's German Indonesian, born in South Africa, moved to New Zealand, moved to Australia. So it's a lot to navigate as a young kid in the world, you know, having the color of my skin that I have, and moving to Australia, particularly, you can feel a sense of isolation because of the color of your skin. I certainly have and do. And it's easy for people to make you feel gaslit, like, oh, you're imagining that, or it's in your head. You just think you're special because you look different. It's actually, you know what I'm saying without even saying it. It's a real part of life and the way you move through the world. And it does impact work. And for example, I did a show, you know, we were all on stage getting ready to warm up and whatnot. And someone was like, oh man, you're like the token black guy, man, so awesome. And in front of everyone, and there's like an awkward beat of silence, and then everyone's back to business. But those moments to everyone else can appear like cool, whatever, but within me, the world stops for a second, and you all of a sudden, like, I can't even put into words how small I feel in those moments.
Yeah, and I think these experiences are like, yeah, when they happen to you, they're so confronting. When, like, you know, that they make it hard to feel like you belong in a place, and that you're welcome. I think this is what's been really special, having you as a mentor. Like, I can see, I don't need you to tell me that, like, that, you know, that you've had X or Y experience, you know, and that it's been different for you doing, you know, trying to work in media as a mixed race person, you know, like, yeah, and it makes me really hopeful, because I can see that it's possible. And I think, yeah, you know, a big part of me has been really afraid that it's not possible.
Gumbaynggirr elder Auntie B. Ballingarry told Charity that to become part of her local community, first of all, she had to show up. So she did.
Get yourself out there, make yourself known. Don't hide away, because hiding away is going to get you nowhere. Whereas when you show up, then you can make connections where connections are needed. It's not about what you know, it's about who you know.
We're at a community event in Charity's local town.
I don't know, I still feel like an outsider. I'm not going to lie. That's probably because I don't really have the connections made fully yet, which is when showing up is important, I guess. But yeah, patience is a virtue. So yeah, it got me out of the house before 7 o'clock. But yeah, there's a bigger world out there than the world that I live.
In the next episode, we'll be jumping into our 4 participants' passions and focusing on what you love to find your people.
Well, normally I wouldn't put myself in an uncomfortable position. I would just continue living inside my head, inside a dark room, doing absolutely nothing. Like, I really wanted to go swimming, but I never had the confidence or the courage to go into a swimming pool. And then I met with you that one time and it was like, oh, it's not that bad.
It was really beautiful, I think. It made me realise that we all feel the same.
It's so good being able to see something that you really can't get anywhere else. So it's really special.
Please make sure that you have a car. Thank you and good night.
If this show has raised any issues for you, there are always places to turn, such as Lifeline on 13 11 14, beyondblue.com.au, and reachout.com, which offers dedicated support for young people. For more information and tips to help if you're feeling lonely, visit wearelonely.com.au. We Are Lonely is produced as part of Medibank's 10-year commitment to addressing loneliness. I'm Gemma Spegg. This show was produced and edited by Liz Keane and Simon Portis from Headline Productions. Music is by Kenneth Lampel. Fact-checking is by Jess Chung, and our team psychologist is Alison Howarth. Our junior producer is Monica Vidgurite. Our team from Medibank include Karen Oldacre, Nigel Davis and Demi Michael. Project and production management by Rob Ranieri and Nick Randall from Ranieri & Co.